G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of my Toyota Coaster bus conversion. Today I'm going to be tackling my mouldy floor. Now you guys know, if you've watched my previous videos, that I actually ripped up the original floor of my bus and replaced it with completely new marine ply. And at the time I sealed it with a few coats of bondcrete, which is what people had recommended to me as a good sealer to use to seal the floor. That was about 8 or 9 months ago, amazingly. But the problem is, since then, here in southeast Queensland, we have just had a really crazy, wet, horrible, hot, humid summer. So we've had quite a few months of really warm, humid weather with lots of rain. I mean, if you're in Australia and you've seen the news, you know that we've just had a major flood event here in southeast Queensland. Now, luckily, where the bus is parked, we weren't badly affected by the flood. We were cut off for a while, but none of the buildings on the property or where the bus was parked was actually flooded. So we were lucky in that respect. But, you know, like everyone else, we've had to deal with the constant rain and the wet weather. And where the bus was parked in the shed is not really very well ventilated. And so, you know, over the course of the last few months, I've noticed that there's quite a lot of mold appearing on my floor. Now, obviously the bondcrete has helped to a certain extent, because I also had some leftover sheets of ply just stored in the same shed that the bus was parked in. They are extremely moldy to the point where I'm just going to have to get rid of them and not use them. So the bus floor is not as badly affected. So obviously the bondcrete has helped a little bit, but it certainly hasn't prevented the mold from forming, which is unfortunate. So, and obviously I don't want mold in the floor, so I've decided it's time to try and get rid of it. So I tried to do a bit of research to find out what would be the best thing to actually totally get rid of the mold. There are quite a lot of commercially available mold killers or mold cleaners. The problem is a lot of them just contain bleach. And the problem with the bleach is, although it can be really good for cleaning mold and I guess hiding it to make it look like it's gone, it doesn't actually kill the mold spores. So the risk is, if you use a bleach cleaner to get rid of mold, that it will just come back. Obviously, I don't want that to happen with the floor, because eventually I'm going to be covering this floor with vinyl. I don't want to be worried about whether or not there's still mold growing underneath it. So I want to make sure that I well and truly kill all the mold that's there, and hopefully prevent it from coming back again. So a lot of people recommend using vinegar. Now, I actually tried the vinegar on a patch of the floor. So in the back corner, I sanded a patch of the floor right back. And you can see that sanding removed most of the mold, but there is still some mold visible, which is sort of more ingrained into the timber. And initially, after I'd sprayed it with the vinegar, this whole corner looked like this little patch here. It was a lot cleaner. There was only a small amount of mold visible. The problem was, a week later, this is what it looked like. So it looks as though quite a lot of the mold has come back. Vinegar doesn't appear that it's going to be effective enough with the mold that I've got in the floor. So what I'm actually going to try is oil of cloves. Now, oil of cloves treatment for mold has been around for many, many years. A lot of people recommend it. So this is what I'm going to try. This is the stuff I've got. It's 100% oil of cloves. It has a very high concentration of eugenol, which is the substance in the oil of cloves that actually kills the mold. So I'm hoping that this will do the trick on my floor. So my plan is, I'm going to sand back the floor a little bit to try and get rid of as much of the surface mold as I can, and also just to create a better surface for hopefully the oil to penetrate. And then I'm going to mix up a solution of this oil, and I'm going to paint the entire floor. And hopefully that will be enough to kill the mold. Well, I've sanded the floor back a bit. It's quite hard work. It is really hot and muggy here today. Anyway, I'll show you what it looks like. It's taken the edge off a bit, but you can see the mould's pretty well ingrained into the timber. So now I'm going to mix up the oil of clove solution, and most instructions say to spray it on, but I'm actually going to paint it on because I think that might help to get it a bit more down into the grain of the wood, and I want to well and truly douse it with the stuff. So I'm going to go and mix up the solution now, paint the floor, and see what we get. Now, it's very important when you're mixing oil of cloves, especially with high concentration stuff like this is, that you wear gloves, because it can be toxic in high concentrations and cause skin irritation and other problems. So always make sure you've got gloves on. And I'm going to be wearing a mask when I'm painting it on the floor as well. So the instructions say to mix up a diluted solution, and you need to put 1 teaspoon of the oil of cloves into a litre of water. So I've got my litre container of water here, and I'm just going to measure out 1 teaspoon of the oil of cloves and add it to the water. And then you need to give it a really good shake to make sure that the oil is well and truly mixed through the water. And this is what the floor looks like after I've painted it with the oil of cloves. Obviously, you can still see quite a bit of the mould. It does look a lot better since I sanded it. So we'll just have to see how this goes now. I'm not entirely sure how to tell whether or not the mould that's there is actually dead, but I'm just going to let this sit for a week and see what happens. If, because when I tried with the vinegar, it was pretty obvious that the mold came back. So I'm just going to see what this looks like after a week, whether it's changed at all, whether it's become worse again. But I'm just going to leave it for now and see what happens.